Hello, everyone, and welcome to Patrox Radio. Now, I'm your host, Patrox, and today, for this first episode, I do apologize. We don't have a proper opening or outro today. I'm still trying to decide on which ones I like, and so we probably won't have some until then. But I wanted to talk, since this being the first episode, kind of how I got here, as I felt like that would be a great explainer as to what I want the show to be. Now, what I mean by this is my path to, general caring and empathy towards the planet and the people. Caring about, the general climate emergency issues, our overconsumption, our issues with plastic waste and microplastics, and, many other important topics that for sure fall into this. But it's kind of hard to encapsulate all that if we don't have, a point to branch off of. So I figured, why not explain myself? It gets you guys to know me pretty well. So my name is Patrox, and that is just a shortening of the fossil name Panthera atrox, or the American lion, which I thought would be an amazing symbol for myself as we try to talk about things like maker spaces, compost bin recycling projects, local festivals, and such, caring about politics both on a local level, a municipality, to a federal level or a state level. Like, these things matter. They all matter equally. And we should all learn to express ourselves in these matters safely. And we should learn how to discuss and learn more critical issues, learn about more critical issues. So I figured, let's go back, all the way back to whenever I was just a little boy. See, I grew up on a military base out in the middle of, nowhere, and out in this middle of nowhere was the only thing I remember vaguely was a little junkyard, right? A little junkyard that I would play in and get very creative and hurt myself with occasionally, you know, getting stung by battery acid, scraping myself on rusty nails and just scrap pieces of metal, exploding old microwaves when you find out that you can't microwave metal. And that's a real thing that happened. But other than it being my playground, if you will, it was also very off-putting when you're not playing in it, when you're not immersed in it. Out compared to the landscape of the desert, it felt eerily weird. And I know now it's just this nature of manufactured items, and nature just feels, some would say civilized, some would say, domesticated or urbanized. For me, it just feels off sometimes. I can't describe it, I can't explain it, but it just feels eerie and it feels weird. And that's a feeling that's kind of carried with me for a long time, and I've never been able to explain that to people before. But even today, when I see like litter out in a patch of grass or whatever, I get that same weird, mild feeling, and I don't know how to describe it. But as I grow older, I have people in my life that I get introduced to, time in and time out as I move around the country, that introduce me to different things, such as little, bracelets that you would make out of straw wrappers, or bags that people would make out of chip bags. Like, I'm talking purses and backpacks. These were things that got me into more crafty type ideas that allowed me to see, waste products as materials to use if I couldn't get better materials. And that's something I liked at a young age, because it allowed me to like look at everything as just a material resource. And this is where I would say I grew to have a more utilistic kind of view of things. I began to understand the vague concept of material finiteness, if that makes sense. The idea that as big as the Earth is, there's only so many materials that still exist on this planet. There is a finite amount. And other than a weird little troubling moment whenever I was concerned about satellites going into space, because it felt like throwing all of our resources out into the vast wilderness of space for nothing. It was an interesting time, to say the least. But I grew to just foster this imagination of understanding how things were used. I liked beginning to formulate this idea of how are our materials being used. I wasn't so much focused on people and labor yet. That came much more recently in my life to now. But at the time, I was very concerned with just the material uses and what I felt was a waste and what I felt didn't make much sense. I never understood why it was cheaper to throw things away and just build a new something in this American market, in the modern globalized capital market. But I knew that materially it made no sense. It made no sense to throw out perfectly good things when you can refurbish it or resell it. I knew it was a waste of materials to just keep manufacturing new ones when you have perfectly good ones going to the dump, or not getting sold at all and just staying out in warehouses until they're forgotten. These were things that I was never able to personally reconcile inside because I was too young to understand a globalized market. I was too young to understand how businesses work, how market incentives work, how stocks really influence people's perception on, the general economy and stuff. I never knew any of this. And I never knew how any of this distracts from real life issues. How do we solve material issues? How do we solve material problems that people face? How do we solve the day-to-day issues, the mental issues that people suffer? How do we solve the systematic issues that we suffer both in our logistics in cities in the country and on a policy level inside governments? Like, these are branching questions that I began to ask myself the more people were introduced to me in my life and showed me concepts like this that got me radically thinking. When a child is allowed to think by themselves out in the vast wilderness, they begin to question interesting things, not the things that most adults are afraid of, but they begin to wonder about the world. And that is a beautiful thing. And a lot of us lose that as we grow older, as we have more day to day problems to worry about. Whenever I was around 13, 14 years old, my dad thought it was an appropriate time to start teaching me basic, tool maintenance and tool usage. We began to work on projects like building a ramp for my brother's skateboard, building a workbench to sit level in my dad's garage, where we began to really discuss alternate methods to find a solution to build a level desk in an unlevel garage. That was very fun memories. Learning certain parts about cars like oil changes, checking your batteries, your tires, everything. Like, these were basic things that scratched that mechanical engineering itch that I have in the back of my head and allowed me to understand that sometimes problems are a little more complicated than they seem on the surface. Sometimes it takes a long time to get solutions, and that there's a reason why we choose simpler methods that seem inefficient or dumbed down. And these were lessons that I began to carry with myself as I eventually started getting into the workforce and getting manager positions at certain jobs. But there was one job that stuck out to me more than anything else that kind of catalyzed my fascination with nature and some opinions about the business world back then that have only morphed more as I got older. I worked for this company that allowed me to make survival equipment generalize. I'm generalizing here, but they allowed me to make survival equipment. And as a smaller company, we often had to make sure our stuff passed a higher quality test. To make sure that the products were good, that they stand on their own, and that people would be willing to buy this, that this is a product that is worth having. And I liked that value. I liked the value of having a product that was, worth what you say it was. There's a level of integrity in that I respect, and these were smart people that were my bosses. Now, of course, I was younger and a little more stupid, so I probably took advantage of their kindness a little more than I should have. A lot more than I should have. But I got to learn a lot working underneath them. I got to learn a lot of basic survival skills as we'd go out camping and practicing a lot of basic things such as starting fires, practicing knots, filtering water, stuff like that. And it got me to like really invest my time and my action into the land. But of course, as we're leaving, very basic tenet, but for some reason it kind of rung a little more back then when they were saying it, that when we left our little outdoor site, when we would test our products to make sure that they were working, we always cleaned up more than what we brought back in. And that stuck with me. That even though, you know, we may have some difference of opinions on other things, such as where do we source manufacturing products, what are our opinions on music, basic things. These guys had a level of integrity about nature that I admired and I respected, and I wanted to become more like. And since then, I like to think I've worked harder and harder to get to that point. Currently, I have a compost bin and a small little recycling spot out on my patio to help me take care of everything I need to reduce my waste so I can get closer to a zero waste impact. Um, I have all kinds of video ideas that I wanted to make later on to introduce small ways that people can change their habits and recycle their waste into new products so that way that they can make more generalized approaches into a zero waste environment. And a lot of that stemmed from watching people like my bosses back then care about the planet, watch them care about their products, their integrity, the way that they treat their customers and the way that they treated each other, the way that they treated us. And it was a moment that things felt just great. A rare moment that things didn't feel wrong. However, this was also right before the Trump presidential era, and this was the era that I had my most questioning. I had my greatest reckoning, if you will. A lot of my old fundy type Christian moral agenda that was kind of hammered into me whenever I was younger got really challenged at this point. My own sexuality got challenged at this point, and I learned a lot about myself because of it. I One of my stronger opinions about being very anti-abortion also got challenged, and now I'm a very pro-choice because not only have I been introduced to circumstances that have really questioned that idea, I've also been face to face with the reality of what happens when you don't adhere to the facts, and it's not good. And I would never wish that upon somebody. I have, questions about the cops that have come up more and more. George Floyd being a primary example. I still carry one of our protest banners that we were holding out there in the downtown streets. I still have one of them, and I carry it with me as a reminder that sometimes activism means getting out there in the damn streets and protesting. Action requires follow through. If you believe in something, you gotta go out and do it. In these times, I've had many things arise and many things be challenged and many answers that I no longer believe. I have many questions, old and new, that I'm still seeking something for. And I've just had to accept that some answers I won't get. Some answers require patience. And some answers were sitting right underneath our noses, and we've been ignorant and arrogant to it, and we refuse to accept it. And unfortunately, those some answers tend to be most answers. And I hate to say it, but it's true. And to this day, I'm now having interesting conversations with old family and friends that I'm wanting to encourage to think a little bit more and have more care in their day-to-day action. And I'm wanting to encourage them to get to a more zero waste lifestyle. But it's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of effort. And it's going to take a lot of patience on my part. I can't expect them to have the same level of urgency as I do when they don't have the same level of care, attention, or even just informative pursuit. I can't blame them for that. I want to be mad, but I can't. And it's hard. But imagine how much improvement we could make if we were all doing this with our family. Imagine how much change we could have if we were all so dutifully trying to help our family, as much as we have to grit our teeth about their wrong opinions, as much as we have to be careful in our approach on certain topics lest we set them off, as much as we try to just make small changes just to make things a little better, even though it's so much work on their end. I know it. I've lived it. I've heard all the excuses. And it requires an extreme amount of resilience, an admirable amount of resilience to still go back to talk to your kind of family, your friends that are like this, and still try to encourage them to do better. I respect it. And I wish you guys well, much as I wish that you guys want for me that. I don't know how this may turn out, but I do know I want to use this as my opportunity to really reach out to people, interview and talk to them, as I am trying to set up certain ones now for this podcast. I am wanting to figure out what are ways that we can create local models that can be adaptive to different environments and different size areas, or to different laws in different municipalities. What I want is something that can be easy for us to do, and connect online, but easy enough to do in our environment that it doesn't take a lot of effort. If we have information and we have the resources to make things better, we should definitely help each other. We should definitely work towards that. But we can't be blinded by ambition and assume that we aren't going to have problems that we can't plan for, that we have to make concessions on. Stuff like material resources are an issue, especially when you're trying to recycle. Not that there aren't any materials out there, but getting to people to recycle is hard. And if you don't have local recycling centers that you're able to actually pull from, like I happen to in my area, it's going to be hard to get resources to recycle. If you don't live in an area with a lot of apartments, it may be hard finding a lot of furniture, pieces of furniture to recycle and or to repair and resell back to the community stronger and better than ever. If you don't have a lot of initial funding, it may be hard to pay for the rent to set up a makerspace for anybody to just use. Even harder still to get them willing to pay or some sort of, donation system to keep it going, because funding is finite. I don't have the answers for this. I don't have solutions for every problem, but I want us to figure out what are our best strategies to get there. And I want this to be a mouthpiece to have that conversation and to have that dialogue and to come at these problems with a healthy mindset and the overall focus on doing what's best for us as individuals, doing what's best for us as a community, as a society, and doing what's best for us for the planet. What are options that do the least amount of harm in these three categories? It may be great for us, society on an economic level and a personal level, but if it winds up being that the trade-off is a lot of pollution or just a lot of excess waste that's being dumped into parks and stuff, that's obviously not a good answer. That doesn't work. But we could do everything that's great for the parks and the planet, and we're not creating any waste. But say we don't have any money to pay for people to do things, and they're not willing to volunteer for the cleanup and stuff. Well, then we're going to have a very shitty park system, and we're going to have a very dirty environment. So these are just hyper generalized examples and analogies to promote the problems that I want us to focus on. I want us to focus on what are our everyday to day issues and how can we go about it. But have a system online that we can all rely on collectively for not only advice and tips and strategies for certain problems that we may all run into, but also find a way that we can network and rely on each other to actually distribute things like financial aid, stuff like medical aid, such as labor if we're in a close enough area, or something else to facilitate needs. I believe in this fully and strongly, and I want to start somewhere. So currently, I decided that this is where I'm going to start. As I said earlier, I have a series of videos I would like to make for my YouTube channel, which will have a variety of different content pieces up there. But one specific thing that I want to do soon is I want to construct a style of recycling bags that can be reused and easy to set up anywhere from just basic supplies. I want to create a metal version that can be sturdy and easier to rely on when it comes to heavy duty pieces if you go through a lot of recycling things, or maybe just a wooden dowel version that could be good for anybody's indoor or outdoor use on a personal level. It could probably be cheaper and easier to do with hand tools. But this style of bin, it's not really a bin, it's really a set of fabric things, kind of bags. There will be a series of them to separate several parts of your plastics and a piece on the side that allow you to stack your cardboard and tie them up. However, there's a few things I would have to explain, as such making like plastic bag fibers so that way you can make your own cordage to wrap up your cardboard pieces. I would also have to explain, sourcing materials and what's the best way to just recycle materials if that's the route you want to go with. I also want to explain just, how to understand the different types of plastics, which I actually do want to cover on this podcast. I want to go over the 7 general types of plastics and the ways that we can go about recycling them and how to identify them later on. I feel that's going to be very important that we focus on that and that we be very dutiful in understanding this as we recycle. It's very easy to slip up and forget to check what types of plastics are what, and how easy it is to misidentify certain plastics if you're only looking at it for half a second. I feel it's important, and it's very much almost like a religious thing for me, so I'm very dutiful about it. But I want to make this easy to understand for everyone, and I want to create a system that's easy to follow. I don't want anybody to feel scared to get into this. And there's more than enough tips out there already of people doing this that I'm already pulling from. So it's not like I'm creating anything new. So I probably shouldn't say I want to create this. But I want us to get a simple model down that we can easily rely on, that is unintimidating and that's easy to build up from. I want you guys to be encouraged to do more, and I want to learn more so I can show you guys. I want to find new ways to use these materials and new people to interact with that may know things or educate us on something that's completely out of my wheelhouse, something that could be fantastic, something like aquaponics, something like native land maintenance, such as, working in the forestry industry, such as working in, the U.S. Land Management, the Bureau of Land Management, stuff like that. Learning how to deal appropriately with the proper burn techniques in forests to burn off any invasive species and allow the hardier native species to grow. Things that may seem counterintuitive to what we want to do, learn the appropriate times to use them, like burn tactics. Learn, the issues and hazards with things like invasive species in certain areas, how to identify things. I have a personal hobby of using plant, mushroom, and rock identifiers on a lot of the walks I go on, and I want to learn more about my local area, and I learn what is indigenous and what isn't. And it's a great way that I have come across to learn more just about my area. It's a great way that I've began to be feeling closer to Mother Nature in this capacity. Um, I believe at one point it was said that, kids could identify over 100 types of plants and insects in their area, and now they can't even identify five, let alone they can identify over 1,000 brands today. And it's all about the exposure that we have. And, we're all glued to our phones more or less in the digital West. And so we see our phone screens more than we see nature, and not even getting into any of the mental health issues that comes with being terminally online. We have a general issue with approaching caring and empathy and compassion for nature and the general populace around us. A lot of us have become very afraid to empathize to a larger degree than we normally do. And it's really kind of sad. I've been babbling a lot on this episode about not only why I care and what I'm trying to do and a bit of where I came from that got me here, but I hope you guys understand that there's so much work that can be done and so many ways to go at this, that even if you don't like anything that I'm saying, that doesn't mean I'm the guy with all the answers. So if you don't like what I'm saying, then you don't like this. You don't care about Mother Nature. You don't give a fuck. It just means that I'm not the mouthpiece that you should be hearing things from. You should find somebody else that you respect and that you like their approach and that you can follow their advice and what they do better. It's not about me being the biggest asshole online that you listen to. It's about caring about the content and just finding the way that you digest it best. You know, sometimes it's not a podcast. Sometimes it's not a dude just rambling online and who's a little incoherent sometimes. Sometimes it's just a little, minute tutorial video and bam, you got it. I don't know. But I do know that we should try. And I do know that we should communicate with each other more. I do know that we should be open and trust each other more when it comes to this. And we should work on having a more generalized effort in caring for the planet. Now, all these wrapped up, I think that this is a very great way to describe what I think being a solar punk means. I think it takes caring about the planet. I think it takes caring about the people, both on a personal, social level, but also on an economic and political level. But it also means doing good by yourself. In these three categories, we will eventually break down a lot of my views on them and what I believe are good approaches to solving these things. But ultimately, if you can have harmony in these three, let's call them spheres for now, if you can have harmony in these three spheres, you can have harmony everywhere. But the hardest part is getting everyone in society to agree or to make collective efforts towards general good. It's hard to do that, especially now when I haven't even begun to discuss the aftermath of the Trump presidency and this turbulent climate that we've had since the Biden presidency for his past 2 years. We just had the midterms, and things are interesting to say the least. And I'm not wanting to get into politics just yet, although it's a very important topic that we do discuss. Just because it is politics as a whole in the U.S. is a very dense, and I feel like we would need a few more mouthpieces to really digest that. I also don't want this to deviate into talking only about politics, because I do think there is a greater focus on teaching and educating about personal action and local action that can be done. And besides, local politics is far more direct and important for people's day-to-day lives. Yes, federal laws matter in sweeping action, but for day-to-day lives, local action is what's going to be a little more important. So learning how your local governments work and learning how local economic systems function in your area, realize what your people most depend on and what you guys need in order for everyone to really thrive in your area, it really helps. Learning the root causes of problems helps you learn how to find solutions, lasting solutions. And so I hope that as we focus on more of these socialist, eco-socialist type discussion points, we can foster a more caring and social model to help people in our local area. The problem is profits. I have come to firmly agree at that the idea of overall profits being the end all be all is what kills a lot of small towns, because that's the justification that allows corporations to come in and sap all the economic potential out of these towns. It's these greeds of these corporations and conglomerates. So you do need a strong labor force in your area, and you do need to provide, some form of commercial good or service. But profits being the end all be all is not the answer. So finding ways to take care of things like, any waste materials, finding niche needs like, probably furniture repair or housing remodeling or better land use and maintenance, maybe starting some form of lawn care or land management company that allows you to better talk your way into discussions about using permaculture designs and native plants into your designs will allow greater, you could argue, greater economic potential later on, as some people still just only speak business. Say, hey, if you're in Texas right now and a bunch of people are coming from California over the course of the next 10 years, an investment into native plants and agriculture is an investment into your future, because now you're investing into the potential buyers that are going to be here, and you're trying to appeal to what they are going to want, which is going to be, more native plants, better land management, stuff like that, which will give you better housing options, or better housing appraisal in the future, in the next 10 years, especially when you take the time now to cultivate it. A lot of these people are going to live in their houses for the next 2 to 10 years. This is the time to invest in that. You can try to make that argument. I don't like that argument because it still argues about profits being the end all be all. But it is an argument to have, and a way to try to convince people to change. Whatever works in my opinion right now, other than sheer violence, of course. Don't be hurting people, you know. But we should be getting people to change. Being a solar punk is going to take a lot of action. It's going to take a lot of care. It's going to take a lot of creativity. It's going to take a lot of ideas that are going to work in one area and aren't going to work in others. We just got to be willing to lend a hand to each other, even if we can't see it on one end. Even if I don't get it, but you need help, I should be there to help you, because we only get there together. High tide raises all boats, doesn't it? We only get there when we help each other. If we all do good. But that's it for me. I'm done rambling. This was far better than I thought it would be. And I really can't wait to discuss other, more defined topics that I get to read from notes from, as it makes it easier and more coherent to understand my babbling. But if you guys liked my babbling and you want to hear more, please stick around, as I do plan to upload every Sunday from this point forward. I cannot promise that at the moment, as I'm still working on a few things, and this is the holiday season. But this is an ambitious promise I'm going to try to make to you guys. Like I said, I do have these 7 types of plastics that I want to go over, and I also want to talk about glass, cardboard, and aluminum recycling as well, along with other scrap metals, so that way we can all fully understand the process that we are getting ourselves involved with, because maybe we can find a way to do this more locally. Maybe we can find new products that we can make out of this. I certainly have some of my own ideas, but that's for another time. Hopefully by then I also have my intro and outro, but no promises, guys. Hope you all have a wonderful day, and know that I love you. Bye.